Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Central Africa and how it's the next country to adopt Bitcoin as its official currency. If you like these kinds of videos, it's important that you stay till the end, check out all of our other social medias, and definitely stay up to date with all your crypto news through us. One thing you got to remember is this is not financial advice. We don't accept liabilities for the losses that you might incur, and everything here is strictly for news and research purposes. So with that in mind, you'll enjoy the subject of this video. So we're going to start off just to say that, Bitcoin is officially another official currency for another country. This is number 2 on the list. It's an African country, so it's a different continent, right? The first country to take that plunge was El Salvador, and now Africa's following suit with this move, right? So this is actually a key marker here, because if Bitcoin is successful in Africa and is successful in South America, it's going to become a very common practice for third world countries, developing nations, or emerging economies. They're all going to be taking the step towards Bitcoin as something to basically base their economy on, because the US dollar basically creates sanctions just by being too valuable for what an emerging economy's dollar is worth. Because of that powerful currency, it allows basically the US to create a barrier of entry to become a wealthier, more developed country, right? But with Bitcoin, what ends up happening now is that people could mine for Bitcoin and then go around the US dollar and actually give opportunity to a third world country or an emerging economy. That's going to be something that is very important for our future, and we're likely to see it become the norm in the next, let's say next 8 years, simply because eventually people are going to wise up. They're not going to trade internationally with the US dollar against their currency, because their currency in a lot of scenarios ends up hyperinflated. It's worth nothing. It isn't something that's basically worth trading in. But if they, let's say, mine for Bitcoin and then create energy money, it's pretty easy for them to take that, exchange it for US dollars, and then basically to be able to interact with everyone's economy. That's a pretty big thing. And the other thing that's crazy is as it steamrolls and more people adopt Bitcoin, eventually you won't even necessarily even need to trade your Bitcoin for a US dollar, because you'll just be able to send Bitcoin country to country. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I think that Bitcoin is poised to swallow the US dollar as the main currency of the world in the next 10 years. It just makes sense. The US dollar doesn't make sense, and we've seen it. We've established our century off of it, based off of us trusting their government and trusting that they'll respect their debts. They're not going to do that. They've crossed the line too many times. 2008 was the last time they really hurt everybody, and COVID, this whole thing, was the last time, the most recent one. And the thing is people are becoming wise, because what makes people laugh at another currency or another country's banking status? It'll usually be their inability to actually run their own country. Sound familiar? That's where it's heading. And it doesn't take a genius to see it. And it's a lot harder to stop that from happening if you don't acknowledge that there's a problem in the first place, right? It's like AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. Can't get better until you acknowledge you have a problem. That's the first step. First step is just acknowledging. If you can't get to the first step, you'll never go through the rest of them, right? So more or less what we're going to see in the next little while is we're likely to see underdeveloped economies go around the US dollar through Bitcoin. Bitcoin will become a hedge against hyperinflation in a lot of scenarios. Another thing too that I wanted to mention is that in the last year they did chain analysis of the African, continent. What they noticed is that there was about $105 billion worth of crypto payments rolling through the continent. It's quite a lot, especially considering that Africa's economy is very small compared to what it should be in comparison to its natural resources. Definitely something to keep in mind. You can see that here on the screen recording. I just highlighted it. Just between the beginning of the pandemic till now, that's a 1,200% increase from the year before. It's pretty big. The other thing too that I wanted to mention was the reason why this is so important is because they adopted Bitcoin also simply because they are tired of having to deal in other currencies and having to buy briefcases of other currencies to be able to transact on the open market. So it eliminates a barrier of being able to do business being an African state. And maybe there's a chance that maybe corruption could start to dissipate within Africa as a whole. Because Africa right now, over years of being exploited, became a very corrupt state, run by warlords and all kinds of different things. And I'm not just talking about Central Africa, the Central African Republic. I'm talking about Africa as a whole. That's the main problem with Africa is the corruption right now and the exploitation going on within it from all countries. You know what I mean? So maybe this will be the beginning of changing that. The last thing that I wanted to mention specifically for this topic is the IMF basically urged El Salvador to drop Bitcoin as a currency. This is going to become something that's very interesting because the IMF was founded in 1945, meaning that it was right after World War II. And who established their dollar as basically a reserve currency around that time? The US dollar. So the IMF is directly run by the US dollar, whether or not we agree, because whether or not they say it or not, like that's the truth. The IMF is the International Money Federation. IMF, yeah, Federation. I'm going to confirm that right now. International Monetary Fund, excuse me. The IMF is the International Monetary Fund, and the whole point of this fund was to create basically monetary cooperation, ensure financial stability, facilitate international trade, contribute to high level of employment and economic stability while reducing poverty. Don't know if you realized it, but none of those things are happening. Poverty is going up, hyperinflation is up, trade is being dominated by certain people and they're exploiting people with it. Financial stability, don't know if you realized it, but we're not exactly very financially stable. The world is on the brink of a recession, possibly even a depression. High level of employment, meh, you could argue yes or no, but no one's getting paid fairly. And then lastly, you know, like, where's the economic stability? Like clearly this IMF isn't so good at what they're supposed to be doing. And that's kind of why they're begging El Salvador not to be involved with Bitcoin. Because once Bitcoin starts to pick up traction and is being used globally, and the dollar starts to lose its dominance, A, there's going to be transparency, but also B, we're not going to need them anymore. So all those kickbacks, all those funds that they would get and basically do nothing with, they're going to lose it. A lot of useless parasites on the world will die with Bitcoin simply because it'll become transparent. I think I covered the basis of what I wanted to today. So hey guys, if you stayed till the end of this video and you like what you see, definitely drop a like, a comment, subscribe, and check out our other content. Take care.